Hi, everyone, and welcome to week 3, Library Policies and Procedures. Before we get started with the lecture notes, I just want to go over a little bit of housekeeping. So the assignment for the end of this week is to attend a library program and post about it on the discussion board. So I just also wanted to talk about some common threads from this week's discussions. So many of the mission statements, they focus on a sense of community and or community building. And I saw that a lot of people covered that. The mission should not be too rigid because it can potentially limit programming options as well as limit potential future growth of programming for the library. And the third commonality to that I saw was that several of the mission statements for the institutions examined were either extremely vague or too lengthy and detailed. Both are problematic because they do not provide usefulness for your stakeholders. And as we learned last week, the best mission statements should be one sentence, but still provide clarity and understanding. So those were just some of the commonalities that I saw as people were discussing. Okay, so this week we'll be studying the basic documents that need to be in place for a library or other cultural institution for effective programming, design, and implementation. So last week was the first half. We discussed mission statements, goals, and objectives. This week's we're going to discuss equally important policies and procedures. All of the above are equally important for successful program design and implementation. So what are policies? The definition of a policy is that it establishes a framework for what will or will not be done in an organization. A policy is a philosophy, standard, or criteria that helps employees exercise good judgment, discretion in management of the organization's daily affairs. Policies range from broad philosophies to specific rules, as per Henson in 2004, page 2. Policies indicate to staff and patrons the beliefs and or the reasons for a library's operations. They inform the staff and the public of the kinds of operations that the library will and won't conduct or support and why they won't. For example, as per the policy of my current library, Enoch Pratt Free Library, we don't charge patrons for any of our programs. Speakers and organizations that utilize our spaces are also not permitted to charge any fees or sell any items. So in other words, no money can be exchanged in any of our spaces. The library covers any presenter and supply costs that would be passed along to the patron. This policy aligns with our overall mission, right, of accessibility to everyone. The caveat is that a library has to have the budget and the funding to support that mission. So if we're talking about inclusivity and allowing for free programming, a library has to have that kind of budget. I have worked in libraries where they will charge for certain programming, for example, defensive driving, or they will charge to offset the cost of supplies. So if you're doing a crafting program, they might charge you a $25 fee to participate to cover the cost of supplies. And again, that's dependent on that specific library's budget. And that, again, that particular library's mission statement. What are procedures? Procedures are instructions that must be followed to achieve the desired quote-unquote policy results. A procedure presents the steps that one takes to accomplish a task. Procedures are tangible, precise, exact, specific, and factual. Procedures are succinct and to the point, again, as per Henson, 2004, page 3. Procedures do not answer the why, but rather they detail the specific actions staff and patrons should take when a particular condition occurs. Policies are conceptual and procedures are practical and concrete. And we'll go into examples later on in today's lecture. So what goes into developing library policies? The basic steps for developing a library policy are as follows. 1, assess the need for the new policy. Does the library have a policy in place that covers the situation? Does the library need a policy on this matter? Is anyone in the library developing a policy on this topic? And conversations relating to policy should be cohesive, meaning you should be having these conversations interdepartmentally. You should not create policy in a silo, even if it is relating solely to programming. Why? Because programming policy can affect operational policy, which can also affect a departmental policy, right? So all of these conversations need to be had cohesively as a group. Research best practices. Do a literature search. Network locally to learn how other libraries handle the matter. And everyone should be doing this because you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. You can look at what another library does and use that to model your best practices if it aligns with the mission and goal of your particular library. Draft the policy, review the draft with stakeholders, get input from affected offices such as your library board, library users, and other groups. If needed, get approval from the appropriate management. Issue the policy by distributing copies to the appropriate offices and posting it in areas where library staff and patrons can see it. And then train effective staff to make sure that they are adhering to the policy or the spirit of the policy appropriately. Develop procedures as quickly as possible. And this is as per Henson, 2004, page 2. What should be included in library policies? So policies should, like we said, should be clear and concise. They should be simple enough that both staff and patrons are able to understand the expectation. Policy should not include library jargon unless you're providing the definitions of the terminology. That would make it difficult for your patrons to understand because patrons aren't always familiar with our internal terminology. So for example, if you're referring to the circulation department, you need to define what is the circulation department, because patrons don't necessarily know that these are the people who will check in your books, handle your library account, things of that nature. So you have to be very, very clear. Library policy writers should use a positive tone. So the pictures that we show at the top of the lesson, they use a negative tone, right? Don't eat in the library, right? It was chosen to highlight how unpleasant and unwelcoming policies communicated through negative language can be for users. So you want to take a positive tone, and I go about that by talking about the environment that we're trying to create. So I had to create policy for our teen department. And I said, the library is a safe space. We want to use positive language versus negative language when we are interacting in the space. We will clean up after ourselves. We will keep our hands to ourselves. So it's the same thing as don't hit other people, but it's saying we will keep our hands to ourselves. Why? Because we are using affirming language to achieve the behavior we want. Responsible office. The name of the office, the library or specific library department that is responsible for issuing the policy should be included, as well as the title. Select the title carefully so that it is simple but clearly reflects the policy's content. So for us, it was the Juvenile Code of Conduct. The date. You have to include the date that the policy will go into effect. It may be the same date as the date that the policy was issued, and if you're updating policy, you want to update that date. Version number, start with version 1 and then increase the version every time you revise this policy. The purpose statement. Write a concise statement conveying the purpose of this policy. Detailed policy statement. The complete yet concise text of the policy. Applicability. A statement of exactly who or what the policy applies to and the consequences for non-compliance if applicable. Definitions. If the policy uses any unusual or specialized language, jargon, or unique application of words, include the list of definitions. Sources of help. Provide the name of the office and specific position title, not an individual's name, that can give interpretations, resolutions, or problems, or permission in special situations. So for us, for our juvenile code of conduct, the sources of help would be myself as the deputy chief, but I wouldn't list my name. I would list, please reach out to the deputy chief or the chief of the central library. Policy authority. If the policy has been issued on the basis of an outside authority, cite said authority. Related forms, policies, and references. So if there's you would have an appendix that would list or contain the related forms, any references that you used, and any additional policies that are connected to that overall document. Include list of related procedures. Cite the procedures that carry out the intent of said policy. And this is all as per Henson, 2004, page 2. The creation of written policy documents does not end with formal implementation, right? To be clear. Policies should be reviewed on a regular basis to ensure the continual alignment with the evolution of the organization. It is suggested that mission statements should be revised every 5 years. Narrower policies, such as like departmental policies and guidelines, should be reviewed every couple of years or more frequently as the need arises per staff and patron requests. So at my current library, Enoch Pratt Free Library, we are currently reviewing our policies to help provide a more welcoming environment for our patrons. One policy we are adjusting is related to no eating in the library. We are moving to make snacks and drinks permissible in areas that are not near technology. So, for example, if you're using our computer commons area, right, we may limit snacks and drinks in that area because you can damage the technology. This will allow patrons to feel more comfortable in our space. Not to mention, food and drinks are basic human needs that people should be permitted to address. If you're hungry, you should be permitted to have a snack, right? We're not talking about a 5-course meal, but we're talking about, chips and water, right? Those types of things we should really look at. And if they're not going to cause damage to our materials, then why not allow patrons to meet their needs, right? So here are some sample library programming policies. Most libraries have many types of policies and corresponding procedures. So I'm only going to go through 2 of the ones that I'm providing, and everyone should be looking and reading through the notes for the rest. So Springfield City Library programming policy. So note, this policy refers to programs sponsored by the Springfield Library Department, not to programs held at the library by community groups, right? So they're not the governing body for community groups that are coming in to utilize their space, and they're very specific in that language. The Springfield City Library offers programs intended to further the library's mission. The library functions as an intellectual and cultural resource for the community. Programs are a means through which the public can share experiences, appreciate special interests, and exchange information. All programs must be open to the public and offered free of charge, although at the discretion of the library director. So the library director can make the final decision whether the program meets the strategic goal and the mission, and determine that they don't want to have said programming. The following will be permissible in library initiated programs or on property governed by library policy. Fundraising to benefit the library, sponsored by the Friends of Springfield Library Incorporated or the Springfield Library Foundation. 2, sale of books or CDs by authors or performers as part of a library program. Presenters are encouraged to donate a copy of their work to the library for possible inclusion in the library collection. The library will endeavor to include a broad spectrum of opinion and a variety of viewpoints in library-initiated programs and exhibits. Community input to types and times of programs will strongly influence programming schedules and will be determined by the mechanisms such as surveys, branch advisory committees, civic associations, and direct conversation with staff. Now, the following statement I've highlighted because I want everyone to pay particular attention to the statement. Library sponsorship of a program does not constitute or imply an endorsement of its policies, beliefs, or program by any library personnel or by the Springfield Library Commission. And I'm very curious to hear everyone's thoughts on this particular statement. And I'd like everyone to keep in mind that libraries are expected to remain neutral and provide nonpartisan access to programming spaces. So as you're looking at that statement, I want to get your thoughts on how you feel about that statement in terms of inclusivity and alignment with the library's mission. So just think about that. Program presenters will be selected from local, regional, and national talent in order to prepare a program schedule that reflects the diversity of the city and the world. The programmers seek new presenters with demonstrated expertise or experience by attending programs at other venues, consulting listings developed by the Massachusetts Regional Library System, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, young audiences, and other states' artist directories, and by contacting neighborhood advisory groups for suggestions. Requests from individuals to present programs are considered weighed against the public's demonstrated interest in the topic, budget, and other allocated resources. So right here, we're talking about the inclusivity of things and making sure that the community need is being met and that their interests are reflected, right? Decisions on which programs to offer are made by library staff, program coordinators. Any questions will be referred to the library director. Appeals for exceptions to these policies must be made in writing to the chair of the Springfield Library Commission. Library programs will be offered at all locations throughout the city and may be offered at locations outside the library as well, such as visits to schools, community centers, information fairs, and housing complex. And that is the gray area when we're talking about programming versus outreach. So what is designated as an outreach event versus what should be considered a program, especially if you're doing things off-site. The library will endeavor to offer an equitable number of programs throughout the city, although factors such as staffing levels and size and existence of programming room will influence the number and types of programs able to be offered. Every attempt will be made to accommodate all who wish to attend the program. However, when safety or the success of the program requires it, attendance may be limited. When limits must be established, attendance will be determined on a first-come, first-served basis, either with advance registration or at the door. In some cases, the nature of success of a program may require limited attendance based on age, especially programs intended for children and teens that are geared towards their interests and their developmental needs. In no case will attendance at a program be limited because of content of the program may be too controversial. Also, consider that statement as you're doing your discussions this week as well. The library does not offer programs of purely commercial nature. Library programs must have special educational, informational, or cultural value to the community. Examples of programs that would be considered of commercial nature include, but are not limited to, presentations offered for free but with the intention of soliciting future business. Very common language for most libraries. The library does not offer programs that support or oppose any political candidate or ballot measure. However, election information, such as the candidates' forums that include invitations to all recognized candidates, may be offered. Because it is not consistent with passive distribution, materials asking library visitors to sign a petition or a letter are not permitted at a candidate's forums or other library programs. The library does not offer programs that support or oppose specific religious convictions. Holiday programs may be offered. The library will endeavor to provide programs that reflect the community's diversity. All programs will be coordinated through the Youth Outreach Services, Programs for Children and Teens, and the Adult and Information Services Department's Programs for Adults, which will approve and assist with program selection and schedules, publicity efforts, funding, evaluation, and work orders. And so this was approved by the Springfield Library Commission on October 1st, 2014. Okay, so that was one specific example, and I'd like you all to take a look at the other examples. Specifically, there's a library program policy that follows. So take a look, and I'm eager to see what you all are thinking about as you post for the discussions or your thoughts on these. Take a few minutes to think about these policies and consider the following questions in preparation for the discussion, right? How are these policies the same? How do they differ? Which policy is the clearest? Which one sends the most positive overall message? Which one sends the most negative overall message? Which one would you most like to copy if you were creating your own program policy for your library, and why? All right, everyone, that concludes this week's lecture. Please reach out to me via email or the discussion boards if you have any questions about any of the assignments coming up, and I hope that you all have a wonderful week.